Valentine's Day is coming up, and for me, there's only one place I trust, 1-800-Flowers.com. This year, 1-800-Flowers wants to make sure you're a Valentine's hero with an exclusive offer. Double the roses for free. When you buy 1 dozen, they'll double your bouquet to 2 dozen roses. It's the perfect way to say I love you without breaking the bank. Trust me, 1-800-Flowers always delivers. To claim your Double the Roses offer, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Renew your health and wellness purpose this new year with The Reset on Alo Moves, a curated weekly program of Pilates, strength, and step goals to kickstart your fitness journey. It's a 30-day week-by-week program, 3 days of Pilates, 2 days of strength, and 8,000 daily steps, plus bonus nutrition tips from Sakara. Plus, for only $99, you get a year's worth of access to Alo Moves, on-demand, full studio experience wherever you are. Get moving today at alomoves.com.
Hello and welcome to mini episode 416 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have 2 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from November the 3rd, 2024. And story number 1 comes from Anonymous. This is back in 2013, 2014, I think. I'd been learning a lot of stuff about demonology, spiritualism, witchcraft, etc. Amongst all of this included Ouija boards. History, usage, safety. Well, call it safety if you want to. A few of my friends thought it would be fun to do one, apparently. For a long time I put them off because I didn't think they could be sensible about it, but me being a teen, I finally caved. One of the guys was a couple of years older and had his own flat, etc. If you know my family story about the Anchor Inn in Hayden Bridge in England, then you know that I'm no stranger to ghosts and hauntings. Let's name some people first for the story. Spock, my friend, and the guy whose house it was. Tatty, my friend. Andy, my friend. Porky, my cousin. Boab, my friend. Mac, my friend. I guess I'll start from the Monday, eh? None of us really knew where to get a Ouija board and never had the money to buy one, so Spock and Tatty approached me about doing a Ouija board on the coming Friday. This was my first mistake, and the very day after months of refusing that I finally caved in and said yes to shut them up. Tuesday. I sourced the wood to make the Ouija board. Nothing significant today. Wednesday. I started making the Ouija board. I got an old soldering iron and Sharpies and started getting artistic making the Ouija board. When I was burning the letters in, I took a break because my hand was beginning to cramp. The soldering iron was still burning hot at this point, but I just left it sitting on the board. This was my second mistake. As while I was scrolling Facebook, I noticed the soldering iron moving slowly towards me. I got a fright and just moved it back and continued with the board. I put it down to the cable being knocked by something, but upon reflection, there's nothing that could have knocked it. But I was looking to have a clear head and be as reasonable as possible all week to keep everyone calm who was going to be involved. Thursday. I had an urge through the day to carve symbols of protection into the Ouija board. My third mistake was ignoring that urge and just going about my day. Friday. In the morning, I sanded down the top of an old Nutella jar so it could move easily across the board. I had calls from Andy, Spock, Tatty and Porky through the day to arrange meeting up later on. I had no idea Mac was taking part at this point. At 5 o'clock, Andy and I arrived at the flat. Everyone else was already inside. I took the board to the back room where everything else, such as the table, the candles, the salt, the holy water, still convinced it was tap water to this day, was set up. At 5:30, I briefed all of them, telling them not to act like idiots and to please take it seriously regardless of whether they believed in it or not. Everyone agreed. At 6 o'clock we started the first session, which consisted of me, Tatty, Spock and Andy. Nothing really happened in the room, but apparently the electricity was flickering in the living room near the end of our session. The session ended at 18:20. 18:30. We started the second session, which consisted of me, Spock, Mac and Porky. I thought this was the time to amp it up a bit and start welcoming anything in. I spoke verses in different languages that I had memorised. All of a sudden there was a sharp coldness in the room and everyone felt it, like an icy chill, as though someone had switched an air conditioner on for half an hour and it all hit us at once. Porky felt unease and asked us to stop, so we moved the Nutella jar planchette to the goodbye position and said goodbye at 18:45. 18:50. We began the third session, which consisted of me, Porky, Mac and Tatty. This session took a very bad turn very quickly. Almost immediately we felt a jerk in the planchette, but everyone thought it was someone else who had moved it for a joke. I wasn't so convinced, because I had my eyes on everyone's hands at the time. Porky went white as if he'd just been sick, and the colour left his skin with it. He continued the session like this for a little while longer and asked to end it again, so we moved the planchette to goodbye and said goodbye at 19:05. This was Porky's last session, as he felt like he had to lay down for a while in the front bedroom. 19:20. We began the fourth session, which consisted of me, Boab, Spock, Andy and Mac. It was a bit cramped, but we powered on. The planchette felt hot to the touch. Mac felt uneasy, and after a little while we saw tears forming in his eyes and they began to fall down his face. I quickly ended the session at 19:30 and took Mac outside to talk to him. He told me that he saw his late grandmother's face in the reflection of the planchette, and a whisper in his ear saying, "Stop it, Mac," followed by another voice that he didn't recognise saying, "Or I'll get you, and get her." For obvious reasons, this was Mac's first and last session. 19:45. We all agreed to take half an hour break, just to stabilise and collect our thoughts. By this point, Porky was feeling better and Mac had relaxed a bit. 19:55. I stood up from the living room couch and told everyone I was going to the toilet. Next thing I knew, I was in the room using the board by myself. Tatty and Spock burst into the room and moved the planchette to goodbye and blew out the candles. They said that I had a lot of fight in holding the planchette still for only having 2 fingers from each hand on it. For whatever reason, I swung for Tatty, which is completely out of character for me. But for some reason, in that moment, all I could feel was rage at him and Spock. The room was icy cold and you could see your own breath, but not me. I felt indifferent to the temperature. All I can ever remember from this part of the night was a view of myself from above the door into the room, with someone walking towards me, then reaching for me as the room door swings open and my friends run in. This vision haunts my dreams, and occasionally my daydreams to this day. This is actually what inspired me to write this out today. 20:30. After a talk, we decided to do one more session to try and fix anything we might have messed up. So we started another session consisting of me, Boab, Andy, Spock and Tatty. They never said anything. They kept quiet, which was discussed prior to this. The room began to feel normal again. The whole house began to feel like a house again. With confidence that any protection against evil measures I had taken were working. Oh, how wrong we were. 2100 hours. We destroyed the board, broke it into 8 pieces, covered it in salt and burnt it. To this day, someone still has the Nutella jar planchette because we just weren't able to smash it, which was scary, but we ended up getting it blessed by Pat, who we will talk about shortly. Friday night, my account. My dog Blue was a little funny with me. Me and Porky had a routine that we would walk our dogs Blue and Roscoe every night. Bonus info for the dog lovers, Blue is a black Labrador and Roscoe was a Border Terrier. When I got home, Blue was out of routine and didn't want to sleep in my bedroom like he usually did. He spent the night at the bottom of my parents' bed on the floor. Spock's and Tatty's accounts. Tatty stayed over at Spock's house that night. They reported hearing banging in the kitchen and someone running through the house at various times throughout the night. They got up to check. Both the front and back doors were locked. However, all of the drawers and cupboards were all open, including the fridge and freezer. The knives from the knife block were all out on the floor in a circle with blades facing in the way. They both thought each other were playing a prank on the other person. Boab's account. He said he thought he was having some sort of psychotic episode because he could see holes in the walls, sometimes black and sometimes through into the other rooms. This was the case in both Spock's house and his own. Mac and Andy, the lucky buggers, were fine all night except for a couple of vivid bad dreams between them. I still think Mac was withholding something from us, but to this day, he pretends to know nothing about that night. Saturday. I was busy for most of Saturday, but there were multiple occasions of me having an overwhelming sense of dread, and I was unusually tired all day. Blue was still off with me all day. At Spock's house, however, everyone had returned except for me. They told each other about their accounts of the night and decided to contact Pat, who was a certified Catholic exorcist who stayed close by to Spock. He knew her through family. Pat was extremely mad at me, and rightly so, to be fair. Pat described the vibe in the house as dark and horrible. She informed Mac first. That wasn't your gran, don't be fooled by things trying to make you more vulnerable, I understand. No one had told her about this prior to her saying that. She conducted blessings throughout the house and on the people who were there the night before. Sunday. Pat arrived at 9:30 and continued her blessings. Around 11, the colour drained from her face and she told Spock, "Something's coming with someone." Just as there was rattling in the kitchen and the back room. About 10 minutes later, I entered the flat, and Pat's dog, Angus, a black Westie, ran at me barking and growling but wouldn't come near me. She then said, "You must be Anonymous then." Her words were more colourful than that though. After, Pat basically read the riot act. She basically just said, "Well, let's get this over with then and you can try and help me clean up this mess." Again, more colourfully worded. She performed a blessing on me and I was dizzy throughout the blessing. But after it all, I helped her with the cleansing of the house, mostly by translating a lot of her words to Latin for her. Me and Spock sometimes talk about the incident together. Tatty brings it up sometimes. We don't hear much from Mac these days. Andy and Boab refuse to talk about it. Me and Porky have more stories together from our lives, but those are things for another writing. I feel like I need to have like a PSA button. Do you know what I mean? I need to have a button that I can just press, a pre-record of a PSA about all of the reasons why you shouldn't do a Ouija board. I mean, I say that, I've done a Ouija board. And would I do one again? Probably. And I think the Ouija board is such a fascinating concept, right? Because, you know, I've talked about the history of the Ouija board before in the podcast. I've talked about it on TikTok. The Ouija board wasn't invented as like this demonic thing. It was invented as a date night game, as like a family game to play. But yet it now comes with this reputation of being this sort of, you know, portal to the other side where demonic things can clamber through. Not saying that that's not what's happening, don't get me wrong, but it is a real, I feel like it's a lesson in intentionality, you know, something that starts out as seemingly quite innocuous and innocent, suddenly becomes something that is actually considered to be quite dangerous if you don't use it properly. And besides that, the person who wrote in this story, I'm not entirely sure if they wanted to be anonymous or not, but stuff throughout the story suggested that they did. So if you are the person who wrote in this story and you didn't want to be anonymous, I apologise. But I thought it was better to err on the side of caution for this one. So I'm so curious about what it was that prompted events to start happening, you know? So you're building this Ouija board, the soldering iron moves, you're trying to keep a straight head about it, but actually the Ouija board sessions are kind of quiet at first. And then is it because you started reciting things in different languages? And if so, What was the language that was the real conduit? I would love to know. It's so interesting. And that's something that always gets criticised on like ghost hunting TV shows, and I think rightly so, where, you know, if they're in different countries and people kind of say, well, why would, you know, they're doing EVPs or voice boxes or whatever, and people are saying, why would German medieval peasants be responding in English? It doesn't make any sense. So I do think it's fascinating that language seems to have been the key to unlocking the activity. And then, of course, you've got your classic cold room planchette moving around and people being physically ill. It almost is like, you know, when people physically respond to things, it's almost like the energy in the room has shifted and your body perceives that and your body responds negatively to it. And it sounds like this Ouija board had a major impact on you, Anonymous, in terms of, you know, you didn't mean to and suddenly you're using the board on your own. Like, what happened in that interim? What happened in the period of time that you were using the board on your own? Like, I know you had an out-of-body vision where you, like, saw them coming back in and, you know, you then took a swing for your friend. But, like, what happened in that interim? I would like to know. I'm sure you would like to know too. And I also can't imagine how terrifying it was for your friend Mac to have that voice in their ear telling them, like, if you don't stop, I'm going to hurt you and hurt her. Who's her? You know, what does that even mean? And I can remember growing up hearing stories about people using the Ouija board and then going to, you know, using a glass as a planchette and going to smash the glass afterwards. But then the glass not breaking. They just weren't able to break it. Which is a weird facet of Ouija board stories, you know? And in this case, the Nutella jar planchette wouldn't break either, which I adore that you use the Nutella jar as a planchette. That is nothing if not resourceful. We love a circular system where we reduce, reuse, recycle. So if you are out there and you're making a Ouija board, try and find an old jar around your house to make a planchette. It's a great idea. And I feel like you're really lucky that Pat was down the road, that you had this woman on hand that you could be like, please come and bless the house and bless the participants. And, you know, and she was able to go, hey, the dogs are behaving unusually because something weird is coming with you. Something weird is with you. But you know what? It all got sorted. Nobody wants to talk about it because you're probably all pretty traumatized. I would be too. But listen, okay? At least you're not being followed around and dogs aren't frightened of you. So that's always a good thing.
To make switching to the new Boost Mobile risk-free, we're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Because you have nothing to lose. Boost Mobile is offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
No, I asked why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Oh.
Wouldn't.
Because you love wasting money as a way to punish yourself because your mother never showed you enough love as a child?
Whoa. Easy there.
Yeah.
Applies to online activations. Requires port in and auto pay. Customers activating in stores may be charged non-refundable activation fees.
Valentine's Day is coming up, and for me, there's only one place I trust, 1-800-Flowers.com. This year, 1-800-Flowers wants to make sure you're a Valentine's hero with an exclusive offer. Double the roses for free. When you buy 1 dozen, they'll double your bouquet to 2 dozen roses. It's the perfect way to say I love you without breaking the bank. Trust me, 1-800-Flowers always delivers. To claim your Double the Roses offer, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Renew your health and wellness purpose this new year with The Reset on Alo Moves, a curated weekly program of Pilates, strength, and step goals to kickstart your fitness journey. It's a 30-day week-by-week program, 3 days of Pilates, 2 days of strength, and 8,000 daily steps, plus bonus nutrition tips from Sakara. Plus, for only $99, you get a year's worth of access to Alo Moves on-demand, full studio experience wherever you are. Get moving today at alomoves.com.
And our second story today comes from Courtney. I'm a physician, and as a doctor, I believe in science, tangibles, and reproducibility. However, even within the field of medicine, there is room for art, which is subjective and open for interpretation. I've had a few experiences in my life that I undeniably can't explain. I never imagined that I'd give these experiences enough merit to discuss them. However, I've been doing a lot of self-reflection lately and I feel like I need to share them. I was 16 when my grandpa passed. He was in the hospital and all the family had come in to say goodbye. It was inevitable that he had only hours to days left. I was staying at my aunt's house with my parents. The night before he passed, I had a very vivid dream, which is unusual for me. In my dreams, I was having a normal day overall, but every clock was stopped at the exact same time. My digital alarm clock read 4:18 p.m. when I woke up, so I assumed the power had gone out, so the time was off. I would check my watch, but the battery had died, leaving the hands stopped at 4:18 p.m. Every clock I interacted with was stuck at 4:18 p.m. If I tried to reset the clock, there was always a reason I couldn't change it. My grandpa passed at 4:18 p.m. the next day. I was very close with my grandmother. She passed away 2 years ago. She was 92 years old and had been on a health decline for several years due to a progressive neurological disease. At the end of her life, she was living in a nursing home, and I would always visit her when I was back home. During my last visit, about 4 months before she died, she didn't recognise me. This absolutely broke my heart, because we had such a close bond, and I know she wouldn't want to go on and not recognise her loved ones. That night, I again had a lifelike vivid dream with my grandmother and I sitting in her living room at her house. It's worth describing her house to get an idea of how special it was. My grandfather was an engineer, and he designed their home himself. It was their dream home. They had a large piece of property in the country, bordered on two sides by a babbling creek, which all the grandkids grew up playing in. She was an avid gardener, and the house was surrounded by beautiful flower gardens. Imagine an idyllic home in the country, dappled in sunlight peeking through the canopy of a giant oak tree, warming your back as you're sitting on a patio swing. That was their house, and it was magical. In my dream, we were sitting in her living room together at her house. She was still older, but she looked vibrant. She told me not to worry because she wasn't living in the nursing home anymore. She said she had moved back into her house. I then heard the back door to their house open and my grandpa's voice shouting, "You, anybody home?" which was their routine when they got home. I woke up right after I heard his voice. There was no vivid dream directly preceding her death. Honestly, the circumstances surrounding her passing almost seemed like a blessing, because despite her significant cognitive and neurodecline, she was overall still quite healthy, and I knew she wouldn't be happy with her quality of life. I truly believe the dream I had a few months prior was her soul leaving this world and saying goodbye to me. The most important person in the world to me has always been my dad. He passed away in June after dealing with several chronic illnesses for several years. We used to joke that he had 9 lives like a cat, because he had somehow survived multiple things against poor odds of survival. He was certainly one of the strongest men I've ever known, and through it all kept his sense of humour and sweet personality. At the end, he was in the hospital for almost a month, and it seemed like he would take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. One day, after he'd had a particularly tough setback the day before, my mom told me she'd been seeing my grandmother sitting at the foot of his bed watching over him the past 2 nights. I brushed it off because she was very tired and stressed. We aren't a particularly religious or spiritual family, and Mom mentioning Grandma watching over him was odd. Dad improved some over the next few days and was doing better. He was lucid and able to have normal conversations. One afternoon we were sitting on the edge of his hospital bed talking. I think we both knew he likely wouldn't be going home again, and we were having some sentimental talks. I told him, "You really worried us the other day. Mom told me she saw Grandma watching over you, but we both know she's crazy," trying to make light of the situation. I was a mini-me of my dad and we'd team up to tease my mom. He looked up at me with a surprised look and said, "Really? That's weird because I've been seeing her too. I've seen her sitting at the foot of my bed." He gestured to the same spot that Mom said she had seen her. I tried really hard to not seem shocked, and he changed the conversation. About a week later, the night before he passed, I had a dream that my grandmother was in her kitchen at her house. There was a big dinner bell on the wall that she'd ring to signal that food was ready. You could hear it all the way down in the creek, and we'd run back to the house to wash up when we heard the bell as kids. In my dream, she was ringing the big bell and yelling, "Yoo-hoo, Jer!" My dad's name was Jerry. "It's time to come in for dinner." I woke up with a start. Since his passing, there have been a few odd occurrences, which I think is him letting me know he's watching over me. I was doing a home improvement project and needed a saw to finish it. I went out and looked in the garage for the saw that I needed, but it was nowhere to be found. I'm who organised all the stuff in the garage, so I know exactly where it should have been. I asked my husband if he had it, but he said no. The next day I was taking the trash out and noticed the saw sitting on top of the toolbox, hooked up to the charger. I asked my husband where he had found it, but he had no idea what I was talking about and still claims he didn't have it. My dad gave me a tool for Christmas every year, and that saw was a gift from him a few years ago. I have a pair of cowboy boots dipped in copper to preserve them, which were his as a toddler. The boots sit on a display shelf in my house, and I've noticed that they move. I keep them heels together and to the right side of the shelf. I've seen them arranged apart, one on the left and one on the right, and moved to the centre of the shelf. Again, my husband swears he's not moving them. Lastly, my dad loved the Beatles. I turn on Spotify in the morning while I'm getting ready for work to my usual indie rock playlists, but a couple of times the station has changed without explanation to the Beatles. Now, I'm not really sure what I believe in still, but I'm starting to reach the point that I can't deny the reproducibility of my experiences. I'll tell you what, Courtney, your experience of having a dream before your grandfather's death where all the clocks were stuck at 4:18 p.m. genuinely gave me the heebie-jeebies. Like, it gave me the shivers. Heebie-jeebies probably isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. It made my blood go cold because I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And it's so beautiful and poetic, and I don't know, like that connection your subconscious has with other people and with the world, that you had that dream and then your granddad passed away at exactly 4:18 the following day. Like, where do you begin to start to explain that? And I know that skeptics will say, now listen, there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic, let me say that first, but I know that skeptics will say, oh, it's probably a misremembering of the dream. But if I had a dream where every clock was stopping at 4:18 p.m, when I woke up, I'd be thinking, what the heck is going to happen at 4:18? I'm just not sure that I would misremember it. And clearly you have some sort of connection with your dream self that allows you to see when these things are going to happen. You know, I really did think that dream of your grandmother ringing the dinner bell as well was absolutely beautiful. Such a significant thing throughout your life, and such a gorgeous image, this perfect house, and your grandmother ringing this big dinner bell, and it's like echoing across the valleys, and all the kids are running in for dinner when they hear the bell. What a beautiful image. And for that to be the image that calls your dad home, you know, oh my God, how incredibly beautiful and powerful. And it really does feel like you've got a really good connection with your dad from the afterlife, with the cowboy boots and the missing saw and playing the Beatles. Oh, it's just beautiful. Your story has really made me emotional, and I'm sure lots of people will be able to resonate with it too. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Anonymous and Courtney for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story comes from November the 3rd, 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website at reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
The new Boost Mobile network is offering unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for life.
That sounds like a threat.
Then how do you think we should say it?
Unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for the rest of your life?
I don't know.
Until your ultimate demise.
What if we just say forever?
Okay.
$25 a month, forever.
Get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile forever.
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.